Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. I'm your host, Scott. I'm here with my co-host, Saur, and it is time to talk Inter Miami football. Saur, it is a lovely Thursday evening. I will just say it was the nicest day of 2026 so far where I am. I hope it was lovely for you, too. How are you feeling, my friend?
It's still very cold here where I am, so I don't think we've received that bit of sunshine that you may have seen back where you are. I'm hoping this weekend is much nicer for me, but I'm doing well. I am really excited for spring to come, and that's going to be another month. So you might see me a little bit more grumpy for the rest of the month and until March. But other than that, I'm doing well. I am very excited for Inter Miami to start playing some competitive, proper football because the off season is putting me off a bit. I'm against being so slow. If Inter Miami wanted to do all their business in one day, that's great for them, but it's bad for business. So for me, and by that I mean the driving dialogue business, gives us less things to talk about. But we're gonna start seeing them play on Saturday, and then the season's very, very close, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, we've got
How are
about
you?
we've got less than 2 weeks until their opener of the regular season. Then it's like 3.5 weeks until they're getting into like a game every two games a week, and
Yeah.
it will be sort of rapid fire. But I agree with you. I think this is sort of a lull in the action for Inter Miami in between these preseason games. Still guys that are coming and arriving. Dane St. Clair finally made it to training. Mikael finally got into training with the team. Tadeo Allende we're still waiting on. So it's been sort of we've gotten our business done. We got to work on paperwork and visas and all that stuff. But for the most part, we're ready to roll. A rumor appeared last week about a young center back from Argentina named Tobias Ramirez. But aside from that, it's been sort of all quiet on the Inter Miami front. And so kind of leaves us with not much to talk about. And so why don't we do something that maybe we would have waited another 2 weeks to do, but I think is worth having and putting on the table and marking down what we think is appropriate now so that at the end of the season we can look back and be critical or sort of have some perspective on what we think this season was. Last season, for example, we went into the year, we had high expectations, and then we won the MLS Cup. And I think everyone was fantastically thrilled with that, myself included. But then if you compare it to what our preseason expectations were, it is almost a little bit of a sobering reality check. And so maybe that meant our expectations were too high going into 2025. I think that's totally fair. Maybe we kind of got caught up in the moment at the end of the season. Like, if you want to put it that way, I understand that too. So I don't know if this is a useful exercise, but I think it's worth talking about. And so let's get into it. What are the expectations for Inter Miami in 2026? That not just be great or excellence or be the best team in the MLS or be the best team in CONCACAF, but like tangible, actual, realizable goals or expectations or standards that this team must, should, or could meet this season. And I think that's something interesting to talk about now so that we can kind of look back at the end of the season and say whether it was actually a success or a failure based on what we thought going in.
I think this is a very useful exercise because, as you said last season, we started off with certain expectations. We didn't meet those technically compared to what we had at the start versus what we ended up with. But still, us as fans were very satisfied, and there's a reason for that. Because our expectations were very high at the start. We expected at least 2 trophies. Those expectations fell down a cliff, if you remember, in the middle of the season. So it was almost that we had to reset our expectations based on how the team was performing. And then towards the end, we understood that this team should be able to compete for the biggest trophies and compete for the MLS Cup. But we were at a position where we said, okay, they might not be the clear favorites, but they will have a competitive run in the playoffs. And then we ended up winning it, which was euphoric for the entire fan base. So I think that just demonstrates how football in general works, how you evolve as the season progresses, how you view your team as the season progresses. So I think it's always important to take stock at the start, perhaps even take stock in the middle and just assess, okay, where are we as a team compared to what we thought we would be at the start of the season? And then obviously, depending on how the season finishes, take stock at the end. So this is the first part of what I think is a long exercise. And I hope there's at least one season where our expectations at the start of the season don't have to be altered, don't have to be changed, and we end up doing exactly what this team or what we expect from this team at the start of the season. So here's what it is. Uh, First start of the season, where are our expectations? I know you and I have a little bit of a different perspective, so why don't we lay it out?
Yeah, well, let me just start by saying this. I think there are, and maybe we should continue to qualify this as we have this conversation, what I expect, what you expect, what the people in the chat and fans at home expect, and then what the club expects. And these can all be very different things. So I think maybe we should make sure we're clarifying when we're talking about different sort of expectations or standards. Just right off the chat, Miami King in the chat says the standard is 2 trophies, one of which being the MLS Cup or the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And I think that is where we were at last year. 2 trophies was sort of what a lot of people predicted. I think a lot of people had high hopes that that was well within reach, and not just any 2 trophies, but one of them had to be one of the big 2 for us. And then if you got the Supporter Shield or the Leagues Cup, it would have been a cherry that partnered with one of the big 2 trophies. And I don't think it's unreasonable for anyone to have the same feeling going into 2026. Like you mentioned, you and I have a slightly different opinion on where we're at. And so why don't we start with you? Last year, I thought was a huge sort of must-win 2 trophies, must set yourself as the best team in CONCACAF. And for a long portion of the season, it didn't feel that way, but they end up winning the MLS Cup, and you can kind of take that as at least an argument to make that you're the best team in CONCACAF at that point in the year. And like, you're kind of right around where you wanted to be, if maybe not exactly where you wanted. You also went to a semifinal. You had a big accomplishment in the Club World Cup, even though it wasn't a trophy. You make it to out of the group stage, and then you go to the final of the Leagues Cup. Like, there was a lot to signal it was a success. But then again, you think back to the original premise: 2 trophies, one of them being the MLS Cup or CONCACAF Champions Cup, and they didn't actually hit that. So where are you thinking? Where are you at going into 2026?
First of all, categorically speaking, I think the last season was a success. Regardless of what our expectations were at the start, I think it was a resounding success. A lot of people will agree with that. But this season, I feel like, for better or for worse, it's the front office that always lays down the marker for us as fans and gives us the hope and expectations by the statements that come out. Jorge Mas, the day that we won the MLS Cup, goes on record to say next season we're going big. Then he goes a week later and says CONCACAF Champions Cup is where it's at. So I think he raises those expectations and that bar for the fans. And in my head, at least, I am fully ready for Inter Miami to be gunning for that CONCACAF Champions Cup. I think everything that we've done in the off season shows that we're playing our cards for the short run. We want to get that trophy in the first half of the season. And if Inter Miami doesn't make it to the semifinal or the final of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, I'm going to be extremely disappointed, because that's what we have set ourselves up for. I think Inter Miami should be going all out for that CONCACAF Champions Cup, and anything less than, I would say, even the final and a very good performance in the final would leave me with a bit of a sour taste and disappointment, because that's the expectations that have been set by the front office again. And yes, we won the MLS Cup last season, but I think this season we want to go that step further. And if we don't win the CONCACAF Champions Cup this coming season, I think it's going to be bitterly disappointing, regardless of where we are at the end of the season.
So is that it? If they win it, the season's success no matter what. And
I
if
think
they
that's
don't,
it.
It's not.
Again, I think it's not as black and white, but I do think a big point for it to be a success is the CONCACAF Champions Cup. In my mind, at least, it's going to be either CONCACAF Champions Cup or consolation. Anything else will be consolation. And it wouldn't be a completely fulfilled season. We may win the MLS Cup back to back, which would be a fantastic achievement. I really think it would be fantastic for this club to achieve that success over the course of 2 seasons, having Messi here. But still, I think at the back of my mind, at least, and I'm not sure which fans would agree with me on this, but in the back of my mind, I would always think this is the CONCACAF Champions Cup season. This is what we've set ourselves up for. And I know you mentioned this to me offline. We can talk about this a little bit in detail here. Next season, yes, we can potentially still upgrade the roster and go for it again. But I almost feel like the way they have been working in the off season, the way they have been bringing in players, it's CONCACAF Champions Cup or bust. And I think that's a really dangerous place to be. But hey, maybe at the end of the season, we end up with an MLS Cup and a Leagues Cup, and we're thinking, you know what, it's fine. It's fine we didn't win the CONCACAF Champions Cup. We'll go again. So I don't know. Again, this is an exercise that we're doing at this point in time. So that's how I feel right now. Ask me again in 6 months, and maybe I'll feel slightly differently. But yes, the CONCACAF Champions Cup is a big goal this season.
Well, I do feel like it's kind of a cop-out to say we'll just see how it goes at the end of the season. Like, I get it. When the MLS Cup arrives, and if they win it, or, you know, they win the Supporters' Shield or whatever, like, you will be elated in that moment because it will have been very fun to watch your team have success there. But also, then that sort of implies the rest of the season doesn't matter if you just do well at the end.
And that's why I'm saying I think the CONCACAF Champions Cup actually matters this time around. Because we may win the MLS Cup at the end of the season, but in my mind, I will still be thinking, oof, we fell short of our primary goal. So that's why I do want to make this caveat at this point in time. The CONCACAF Champions Cup is the primary target this time around. And maybe this season, winning the MLS Cup may not actually alleviate that disappointment if we don't win the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Last season it did. Next season it might not.
I still feel like you're equivocating here because that's still giving yourself leeway to back out of it later on. And that's
no, I'm
fine.
not backing out of it. I'm laying down the marker right now. I'm saying CONCACAF Champions Cup is where it's at.
Okay. That's certainly what the club has asked for of their coaching staff, of their players, of their front office. Like you mentioned, Jorge Mas came out at MLS Cup in the days after and said, CONCACAF Champions Cup, that's what we want. And by the way, they have backed it up with sort of the roster improvements or acquisitions that have shown they are serious not just about winning, but about winning right now. This CONCACAF Champions Cup for Inter Miami is going to start in like 3 weeks. So, I agree with you that if they don't win the CONCACAF Champions Cup, it's going to be tough to say this season was a smashing success because they've built everything towards it. Now, I think we kind of disagree on what happened last year. Like, I think the fact that they ended on this incredible high does not necessarily negate some of the, frustrating moments over the course of the season. But hopefully they learn from them and, can improve based on it, on those lessons moving forward. So I'm a little afraid of that because I don't want our season to be over.
And that's the thing, right? It's a dangerous place to be because you've backed yourselves in this corner by making those statements and building the roster for this go or no go situation with the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Yeah. And so I'm not trying to be a downer or not even a downer. They're probably going to play Nashville in the second round of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, their first round. They could lose in 2 games. Now, I think they'll beat Nashville. They own Nashville, really. So I'm not really worried about it. But theoretically, they could lose in the first round. It's not like they're playing Cavalier or Atletico Ottawa or like some Caribbean team. They are going to have like a legitimate competition in the very first game of this tournament on the road in Nashville, in a place that is tough to play. And I get Inter Miami's done well there, but pressure's on. You go to game 2, and by the way, it's not only pressure's on to get through each round, but you have to excel in each round to continue to set yourself up for success moving forward into future rounds. And that becomes the most important when you get to the final, which is a one leg, are you going to host it or not? And Inter Miami is not on the easy side of the bracket. Last year, they had a very clear run and path to not just make it to, but host the final of the CONCACAF Champions Cup because of the way their path laid out. That is not the case this year. They do not get any easy opponents to sort of buff up their goal differential. They don't get easy opponents to get an easy road and home win.
Or get in form. They don't have any excuse to play poorly now because any opposition could capitalize on it.
Well, that's a different point entirely, but also equally valid. But if you want to host into the later rounds, you have to not just win your earlier games, but you need to run up the goal differential. And if you're playing a team from the Caribbean, it is much easier to feel confident going into Jamaica or go into Haiti and run up a 3+ goal differential than it is when you're playing Nashville on the road at Nashville. So the fact that they don't have any non-Liga MX MLS competition on their schedule, probably, because again, Nashville has to win their first round against a Canadian Premier League team, that makes it more difficult. So here you are. You have to go win this tournament. That's what you're talking about. That's what you're building the roster for. That's what you have given as a demand to your coach. And I am very confident that it's not Jorge Mas's sort of brainchild to go win the CONCACAF Champions Cup. That is something that bleeds through the entire ownership group and leadership of the team and Messi and his people. So this is sort of a demand. And man, it's like it's a knockout tournament. It's not easy to just go dominate it like a league would be, where if you have a clearly the best team in the league, you can just rack up points week after week after week after week, and you can have a slip up here or there and still run away with the league. It's not what this tournament is. This is you have to show up every single game, not just to get through that round, but to set yourself up for later in the tournament. So it's a dangerous place to be living in.
I thought we were going to come with two different perspectives. What happened here? So you're agreeing with me, basically.
Well, I guess my perspective is I think it's unfair to say this season's a bust if they don't win the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
That's fair. Yeah.
That's why we're different. And it's not because I don't think, clearly the front office has said this is what we're trying to do. Clearly they have made moves in pursuit of that goal. And they've gone all in, and I commend them for it. Like it is easy to just talk, and it is harder, more difficult to just kind of go all in on something. But I also don't want our season to be over at the end of March or the end of middle of April or whatever, and us feel like the rest of the season is pointless. I, as a fan, don't want to live there. So, and I also don't think this CONCACAF Champions Cup is. I don't think Inter Miami is the shoe-in to win it either. I don't think they are overwhelming favorites. They are one of the favorites for sure. They absolutely can win it. If you made me pick right now a single team, it might be Inter Miami. But I would certainly take the field over Inter Miami, and that's, again, a very dangerous place to live, which sets me up to be even more excited if they end up doing it, as opposed to sort of setting yourself up for we have to do it, and if we don't, it's an utter disaster. Which is where I think I spent most of last season, and I don't want to be back there again.
And I feel like it's almost the expectations are unrealistically high to win the CONCACAF Champions Cup. To be so blatant about it's either CONCACAF Champions Cup or bust. I think that way. I agree with a lot of people in the chat and in the fan base that yes, that is the place that we're at, unfortunately, due to what has been said and done in this offseason. But it's dangerous because a lot of teams never win the CONCACAF Champions Cup in their history. Inter Miami may not win the CONCACAF Champions Cup in their history because it's not easy to win. It's a tournament that will require you to play against some of the best in the conference. You have a lot of the intangibles stacked up against you because you not only have to win your games, but you also have to make sure that you win games by enough of a goal margin that you're able to then host in the final. And if you're unable to do that, you're basically fighting with not one, but potentially both your hands tied behind your back. Ask any MLS team that
Well,
has played the final
maybe the
recently.
right
So
maybe the right analogy is you have to play with your stomach tied in knots, and that's the
exactly.
sort of
Or
struggle
just
of going
don't
to
touch
Mexico
the
for a final.
food.
Exactly, or the
So
water.
there's just so many intangibles associated with winning the CONCACAF Champions Cup that it almost feels unfair for us to, as you said, put so much expectations on it. But yeah, I'm here. I'm putting those expectations, and I'll be bitterly disappointed if Inter Miami doesn't win that this season. But that's just how I feel with what's been done and said this off season. So I don't know if it's a good place to be or it's a bad place to be. You're being optimistic and saying you're excited because if Inter Miami actually pulls it off, it's going to be euphoric, and then the rest of the season is almost a cruise because then you've achieved your primary purpose. But then I think that if you don't achieve this first goal that you set yourselves out, or the ultimate goal that you set yourselves out for this season, then you're almost playing catch up for the rest of the season, trying to rectify that. And as fans, that's not going to be as fun to experience. But hey, I'm sure we're going to reset those expectations at some point in the season. I will come back to this and still say that I will come back to this and say that I said the CONCACAF Champions Cup matters, but you don't know what happens at the end of the season. So
And just to put a final period on that, like I don't think it matters that you have success in the tournament. I think it matters if you win or not.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
last year they went to the semifinal and they had the most fun game maybe of the first half of the season in that LAFC comeback. And like I thought it was a ton of fun playing Cavalier and learning about that club and trying to learn about all these players. Seeing, and by the way, some of them have. I checked the other day, and some of the Cavalier players we were talking about a year ago have gone on and are now in Europe. Not the point. But like I thought the whole experience was fun up until Vancouver in the semifinal. And for most teams, even Inter Miami in years past, getting to the semifinal of the Continental Tournament would have been a success. But it felt horrible last year, not only because they lost, but because certainly in those two games they didn't put their best foot forward. This season, I don't even think you can get to the final and lose 3-1, to a Mexican team and feel like that was a success. I feel like
No.
you have to win it, which again is
It
just
was the
making
same
it
with
that
the
much
MLS Cup,
harder.
right? So maybe that's the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
When we went into the MLS Cup final, we said to ourselves, this is it. If we lose this, it's bad. We said it up until the Nashville game, where if you get knocked out, it's almost game over for that season. You're putting yourself under so much pressure and you have to pull it off. And Inter Miami pulled it off. So I think by maybe cornering ourselves and saying the CONCACAF Champions Cup is it, perhaps Inter Miami mentally is ready for that. We did it last season to an extent, and maybe this season they do it. But I am so excited though, because I want to see this team compete. And I have a feeling that they're going to go gung ho for that tournament. Last year, we didn't do that because we were almost tiptoeing in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, trying to understand how this team was to play. This season, I don't think we have that luxury to play into form. So it's almost really exciting as fans to be like, let's see what we look like in that first game, because that's going to tell us a lot. And I'm excited for that. I really want to see us perform well in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And I'm not even thinking negatively here. I do genuinely think there's a chance Inter Miami gets to the final. Whether we win it or not, I hope we do. But I think this team is ready mentally to go out and have a long run in the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
I do want to say, like, the fact that the team has made it a big deal and this is our goal and they've been public about it has not necessarily translated into success for Inter Miami over the last couple of years. Like they came into 2024 saying 4 trophies, 4 trophies, 4 trophies. We're trying to compete and win all 4 trophies. And it was like, okay, that's awesome. It was super fun to listen to as a fan. And like Julian Gressel's first press conference is 4 trophies, and Drake Callender at media days 4 trophies. Like it was a motto and the thing clearly the club was talking about internally. And I'm certain if Jorge Mas had been given a mic at that point, and maybe he was, and there's a quote from him, he would have said 4 trophies, because that was the mantra for the team in 2024. And it's like they lost their first trophy in like quickly. And so, and then they lost the Leagues Cup, and So it's just like that season they ended with the points record, and it was a good season by all accounts. And we'll look back in 10 years and think like they were really good that year. But it's one thing to be good, and it's another thing to actually win the trophies. And if you want to confirm yourself as trophy winners, you kind of have to be way better than everyone else, or you kind of have to have luck, and, and things go your way. And so for Inter Miami, like, that's a lot of pressure to have things go your way if you're not far and away better than everyone else. So maybe that's the next question. Is this team far and away better than everyone else? Let's start with the MLS.
No, not at this point. I would have said last season, maybe in the MLS, yes. I don't think this season in the MLS we're far and above everyone else.
I still think they were better on paper at the beginning of last season
than
they are now.
I agree with you. I think there's been changes, and I'm not saying this team can't be phenomenal, but it's going to take time for us to kick into gear. There's a lot of teething issues that we've seen in the couple of games in the preseason, and those will eventually fall into place, but we don't have the luxury of time, unfortunately, at this point. And right now, I feel like Inter Miami still has a few things to figure out, primarily how the coach wants to play and set up this team. If you set this team up the way that it should be set up, I think I'll be a little bit more confident in saying we are potentially head and shoulders above, or at least shoulders above the rest of the MLS teams. But I think at this point in time, Javier Mascherano still doesn't optimize his starting 11 and his playing style to this roster, and that's for me a little bit concerning. And that means it's going to take time for this team to kick into gear, and we're going to have a lot of individual brilliant performances. And this time we don't have the luxury of Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets being world class. So I think, to answer your question simply, even at the MLS level, I don't think this team is head and shoulders above everyone else.
It's funny because you and I are dancing around similar thought processes, but on opposite ends of it. I do think this team is better than every other team in the MLS by a pretty healthy margin, just like I did last year. And maybe that's the point, is I don't think Inter Miami in the last 2.5 seasons, since their first offseason with Messi at the beginning of 2024, I don't think they've ever had a lack of talent, and probably were far and away the best, most talented roster. And yet still, we've seen coaching and, not to make it about Mascherano, we have seen sort of a lack of ability to maximize what this team could be, and that's difficult, and I get that. And now we've gotten a reset in the roster without Jordi Alba, without Sergio Busquets, and I think we're going to also not have Suarez in the lineup much of the time. So it is going to be a reset. It is going to be reshaped, and it's going to hopefully feel different and more exciting and more energetic. But I don't think it's a talent thing. I think it's
a setup.
They've always been more talented. It's about, can they get it all to work at the right time? And so, as I'm reading the chat, as we're talking about this, there's a lot of comments about Javier Mascherano. You kind of have to be firing on all cylinders. And is it weird to you? Weird, maybe the wrong word. Is it frustrating to you that it looked like at the end of last season, not just the last 4 games, the last 6 to 8 weeks, we were firing on all cylinders, heading into the playoffs and then through the playoffs. And then when we got to our peak, which was in those final 4 games, and it was fantastic, we're kind of not going back there to start this season as we head into this tournament.
You've absolutely nailed it. I think one of the reasons why I'm a little bit frustrated, bored, I think is the right word. I'm not looking forward to Inter Miami's preseason games because A, they don't necessarily mean anything, but we're not going to see anything new from this Inter Miami team. We were almost at a euphoric high at the end of that MLS Cup final where you could see that this Inter Miami team was 99.9% unbeatable. Vancouver came very close to their credit, but even on their best day, they were not able to beat this Inter Miami team. We were that good in the playoffs. I thought this would be the level that Inter Miami would start the off season with. And for those who are listening to us and are on audio, I have my hand quite high up. Unfortunately, Javi Marciano has reverted back to the lower level that we saw last season and almost taken us to -5 instead of starting from 5, or 0 instead of starting from 5, which has kind of dampened my mood. I know we're not going to see anything different in the preseason. I know we're not going to see different formations, unique combinations in the front line, different midfield setups in the preseason. So I'm almost ready for the season to start, because I know once the points start to matter, once the games start to matter, Javi Marciano is going to have to make the changes to get the best out of this team. So I'm almost at that point where I'm like, you know what, get me into the first 13 games of the season where Javi Marciano has figured it out and we're back to level 5, maybe even level 7 with this team. Because until he figures it out, it's going to be quite boring and frustrating. So you've absolutely nailed it. Very frustrating, disappointing, and boring that Javi Marciano sort of reverted to his type rather than expand from where we ended last season. I think somebody in the chat mentioned this. Javi Marciano's blueprint for this season should be start where you ended the last season and then plug and play, rather than go back to where you were in the middle of the season and then build from there. So I don't know if you agree with this, but that's one of the major reasons why I'm almost really ready for the season to start.
Okay, let's move off of Mascherano. It's not the point of this is to pick on him. I think we all have our opinions on
We're
Mascherano
analyzing, not picking.
Yes, of course. But again, not the point of this episode. They are going to potentially play in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, Nashville in the first round. And then after that, probably Club America and Philadelphia Union are going to, the winner of that will go on and face the winner of Inter Miami versus Nashville. Philadelphia's lost some key pieces. They've bought some young players. Listen, I did not think they were going to be good last year, so I am not going to predict that they're going to be terrible this year. But they've lost some of their most important pieces. So we'll see what they look like. I can't imagine Club America won't be, good. And then you have Seattle, Vancouver, FC Cincinnati, and Tigres. One of those four, in all likelihood, is going to come out from that side of the bracket in some sort of semifinal. And then the other side of the bracket, which has LAFC, Monterrey, Cruz Azul, San Diego FC, who, by the way, crushed Pumas in their first leg this week. Those teams actually all have an easier schedule. Toluca also there. So I actually think it'll be very difficult for anyone on our side of the bracket to end up hosting the final. Very, very difficult. And so for me, I'm not going to say it's CONCACAF Champions Cup or bust, even though that is exactly what the club is saying. To me, like I don't want to put my hopes on a successful season on that one thing. And so I'm very happy I talked you into putting it on, putting the words out there before I could talk you off the ledge.
No, I think you make a good point, but I feel like I've already walked close to the ledge and I'm ready to jump off once we lose that CONCACAF Champions Cup final.
Okay, so let's talk about everything else, because the CONCACAF Champions Cup final is not the only thing Inter Miami is going to do or participate in. Actually, of course, it's the number one trophy. And for me, I want to fill the trophy case with different looking trophies. Like I want to have one of everything. I don't know if anyone else has that, but for me, that's really
it's the completionist in you. You want to complete the set before you start getting multiples of the same.
Well, I'm happy to get multiples, but I certainly want to complete the set. And so, obviously, Inter Miami has not had a CONCACAF Champions Cup yet, and that is number one. But the other thing they haven't had is a Campeones Cup, which would also be pretty cool.
I think that'll be pretty cool, yeah.
The other four competitions they're going to participate in, or potential trophies they could win this year, I should say, is the Supporter Shield, the Leagues Cup, the Campeones Cup, and, of course, the MLS Cup. Unlike years past, where it felt like all of our trophies were at different points in the season, there will be sort of a logjam in that 65th to 75th percentile of the season, where you're kind of getting into the crux of, if we're going to make a run of the Supporter Shield, we got to get going. The Leagues Cup's right there, and of course the Campeones Cup is also going to be scheduled in and around there at somewhere. So it's going to be tough, I think, to sweep everything. But how are you feeling about every other trophy and what you want overall? And then we'll get into specifics after.
I want a treble. Bring me a treble and that'll be fun. MLS Cup, CONCACAF Champions Cup, and then either the Supporter Shield or the Leagues Cup. That'll be really fun, right? So we're assuming Inter Miami is unable to make it to the CONCACAF Champions Cup. I think the next big step is to just go out and try and win everything. That's the only way you can recover the season. You have to win Campeones Cup is going to happen before the World Cup, I believe. So after the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
It'll be in the fall, probably like September.
Oh, later. Okay, after the World Cup. So win that, win the Supporter Shield, win the MLS Cup, and then maybe it's a successful season again. Now, I'm not really sure how to answer this question. I think Inter Miami will have to finish the season with at least a trophy, whether it's the Leagues Cup or the MLS Cup. I think winning this Supporter Shield.
But what do you mean by they have to win a trophy? Win a trophy in order for
this to be any sort of a consolation of us losing the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Inter Miami has to finish the season with a trophy. Period. They have.
So you're saying it's a failure if they don't.
It's a failure if they don't win the CONCACAF Champions Cup, but it's an even bigger failure if they don't win a trophy. It's like adding fire to the wounds if you don't win a trophy. Yeah, I would take a quadruple as well. Honestly, let's do it, man.
I guess I'd take a quadruple.
Yeah.
Sean says the only true American treble includes the U.S. Open Cup. I agree with that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
A true American treble would be the Open Cup, the MLS Cup, and the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are different degrees of how this works, though, and that's why I want to kind of differentiate, because there's the goal, and the goal is to win every trophy, but then there's sort of a realistic goal, which is like what I think a lot of people are talking about. Win the CONCACAF Champions Cup, win another trophy, and you're like, fantastic.
Seventh heaven.
Then there's like the
second place.
Expectation.
Yeah.
There's the goal, and then there's your expectation. And your expectation from the club's perspective is win the CONCACAF Champions Cup and then probably go win everything else, right? But realistically, like they want to win that. For me, I think it is slightly lower. I'm with you. I think they have to win a trophy this year. I would be shocked if they don't win something this year. And so my expectation is they're going to compete for everything and win at least one thing, and hopefully two or three, and the two or three ends up being the ones we really want. And then there's absolute utter failure. And then
No. I think you
there's
jumped
30 there's 30 feet of feces, and then there's the Oakland A's. No, but failure, it would be 0 trophies, and I don't think there's any. I don't even think you can have a success if you don't win either the MLS Cup or the CONCACAF Champions Cup. I don't think winning the Campeones Cup, although I think it would be really fun on that day, is
a one-off game.
Is going to like make this season not a failure. So, or even a 3-week run in the Leagues Cup, for example. Like I don't think that would make me feel better overall about the season, even though if they won it on that day, I'd be euphoric and we would be having long celebrations. Do you think they're going to hold the people in the building accountable to those standards? And what I mean by that, because again, and Sean mentioned this in the chat earlier, this is what the club has said. We didn't set the expectations as fans. This is what we were told the expectations were by the club. If they are not meeting those sort of expectations, and again, we've talked about the difference between competing for and actually winning. And this is not a team built to hopefully compete for. This is a team built to certainly compete for and win. And so, do you think that player, not just like I get Javier Mascherano is the easy person to talk about, but I don't want to just put on him. Obviously, the coaching staff, but also a lot of the players. Is there going to be repercussions for missing those goals?
I
Because
think inevitably there will be. Because you bring in players on certain short contracts, Dane St.
well,
Clair. You're bringing back players who won you the MLS Cup, but are they good enough to win the CONCACAF Champions Cup? I do think Inter Miami will think that if they're not able to win the CONCACAF Champions Cup with this roster, then they have to go bigger and better. And that may involve getting a better coach. That may involve getting better players. Have you been able to find the right permutations? Was bringing Berterame in as your DP the correct choice? So I do think those questions will be asked and somebody will be held accountable. I always think that the buck should start with the coaching staff, but I agree with you in the sense that they should hold some of the players accountable as well.
well, here's what I want to say. Last year, Inter Miami won the MLS Cup. The year before that, Greg Vanney and the LA Galaxy won the MLS Cup. And then they were awful last year, just awful. I get there were some circumstances that would make it more difficult to compete at the sort of highest level of the sport, but they were awful. For much of the season, they were like the second or third worst team in the league. And that's with really, really good players like Joseph Painstill and Gabriel Peck, who they couldn't get a lot out of. And if you look at Greg Vanney's time at the LA Galaxy, the championship season is actually the huge outlier. But the thing is, he won an MLS Cup. And so he got leeway. And by the way, they signed him to an extension as they were terrible last year, which is crazy to me, but not the point. My point is he won them an MLS Cup, and then he got huge grace moving forward. Is Inter Miami different? Is Inter Miami in a position where you won a trophy, whatever, like you didn't win the next trophy, and so you got to go? Because they did sort of do that with Tata Martino.
I was going to say the case is already there with Tata Martino, so they've done it. They are ruthless when it comes to these decisions, and I think Javier Mascherano's brief is going to be simple. You repeat what you did last year. You win the CONCACAF Champions Cup or the MLS Cup. Anything less is not enough. That's what it should be, I believe.
I'm with you.
And let me
I think the
this.
grace, the grace you got from the MLS Cup is what gave you another season.
The job,
A lot of the players and a lot of the coaching staff, like much of last year, would have been a real disappointment. They didn't finish with an MLS Cup, and so I don't think you go into this next season thinking there's some sort of built-in credit. But I'm also just one person who's been very skeptical about a lot of this for a while, and so maybe the fans feel differently, and let us know in the chat. I don't know if I see them making those substantial changes mid-season. We've talked about potential exodus in the summer, but that's if things go right? Like guys like Noah Allen or Telasco Segovia or Dane St. Clair or Ian Frey, like they could be making their big move after the World Cup in the summer because they've earned it and because Inter Miami won the CONCACAF Champions Cup and this season's already a success, and we're going to sort of reorient this for the next few years and this sprint season next year and all that stuff. So it does feel like if everything goes wrong, I don't know, are they going to have grace or not? I don't know.
I have the perfect solution, man. Very easy. I feel like the front office has almost treated this as two separate seasons. One before the World Cup, second season after the World Cup. I think that's how we should approach it. What are the expectations for the before World Cup season? And what are the expectations after the World Cup season? Because I think those are going to be two very different expectations. I'm reticent to say that if Inter Miami doesn't win the CONCACAF Champions Cup, the same team is even going to be competing for the rest of the trophies, because we don't know what happens in the summer. We don't know what kind of changes happen, who goes in, who comes out. There's a lot of question marks about that as well. So maybe we should just treat these as two separate seasons instead of one big season,
But
like we did
but
last season.
a lot of those outgoings are not natural outgoings. Like if, for example, Noah Allen, there's a world where Inter Miami loses to Nashville and they're playing one game a week, and then he's not even starting much of the time,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden he's not able to showcase himself to Europe because Mascherano doesn't rotate. Like it could all fall apart really quickly, and then those types of things you're talking about don't materialize in the summer because the players aren't in good form and they're not going to the World Cup and whatever, right? So, and then you're actually kind of stuck because that's how you build flexibilities by players being so good that they have created opportunities for themselves in bigger and better places. Kareem has a super chat, and thank you so much for that. He says, to win big, we can't play the full front four. I hate that. And I'm assuming that's the sort of back four, two-man midfield, and then sort of 4-4-2, but it's really sort of wide midfield, wide attackers with the front two.
Mm-hmm.
Can they win by doing that? Let's just stick
You
with
ask
the
me
CONCACAF Champions
tough
Cup.
questions that I don't want to answer, and I want to say no, they cannot. They cannot. Unless Berterame changes the nature of that 4-4-2, I don't think they can, and I don't think Berterame is going to change the nature of that 4-4-2. I think your biggest issue in that 4-4-2 is your midfield. That's the one that's putting everything under pressure. It puts your attack under pressure. It puts your defense under pressure. And until you fix that, I think Inter Miami is always going to be fighting with one hand tied behind their back. Always.
But this is what Messi wants, right?
I don't know. Because why did we turn to the fourth? Well, why did we turn to the... It was still a 4-4-2, but it was a modified 4-4-2 in the playoffs. Why did we play it differently?
But he
And
didn't
why are
play
we not
differently.
resorting to that?
Like, I don't think he played tremendously differently. Like his role was different because he didn't have Suarez in front of him, and he was playing sort of next to and sometimes even in front of Silvetti. But like it was still a two-man front with him and one other player, and he was kind of just there to analyze. And I do wonder if there's sort of a fear. Fear is the wrong word, but sort of a hesitancy to go to some sort of 4-3-3 where he's sort of a right winger, and that allows you to have a sort of different personnel and set up in the midfield, and make the whole team, in my opinion, work better, because he doesn't want to do that. Even though I still think his role would look the same as it does now, but like I don't know. It feels like they are very hesitant to go there, not just under Javier Mascherano, but even back when Tata Martino was here, they certainly tried to find ways to make it a front two with Messi.
Do you think it's because it puts too much pressure on Messi in terms of his running and in terms of his defensive work?
I don't think it would require him to change his play style at all, but maybe he and the coaching staff do.
Maybe.
And then, okay, so here we are. We've seen 4-4-2. Maybe Berterame is going to come in and
It's
they're
going
going
to
to switch it up. And just because Suarez was starting, they wanted to play. But it doesn't feel like they're about to introduce some crazy new scheme that we haven't seen before or recently this weekend or over the next couple of weeks. So if they stick with a 4-4-2, can they win the CONCACAF Champions Cup? Yes or no?
Yes.
I agree. I do think it's harder, though. And I think we are going back into this. We're going back into this. Are you overwhelmingly great?
Exactly.
And so you just run through everyone? Or
You're not
are you as
outright
good as
favorites.
everyone? Are you as good at everyone as everyone? And so you need some things to go your way and a little bit of luck and a ball bounce here and there, and that's how you become champions. Like, I do think when they're doing what they're doing now and what they did for much of last season, it is more of the latter, where they can, of course, win. And they can win any game that Messi plays, without a doubt. But if you want to aim for being substantially better than everyone you play, I don't think you're going to get there with this formation.
So what are expectations then?
Yeah. Okay, so getting back to some of the other competitions. I always feel hesitant to talk about all of them in conjunction or in one sort of sentence, because here's the truth. If I said right now, I would happily take the CONCACAF Champions Cup and give me the Campeones Cup, and then I don't care what else happens. The truth is, when we get to the Leagues Cup, I'm going to want to win it. And when we get to the MLS Cup, I'm going to want to win it. And when it's time to win the Supporters' Shield, I'm going to want to win it. Like, it's easy for me to say now, I'm happy with X. But when you get into the moment where it's time to actually compete and try and win, all of a sudden you have it right in front of you and it's open for you. You want to go for it. And so I hate the idea that the Supporters' Shield doesn't matter. I hate the idea that the Leagues Cup doesn't matter. I hate the idea that Campeones Cup doesn't matter or whatever. Like, it matters when you get there, both to the fans and absolutely to the players. Everything matters to the players when it comes to winning silverware, especially on this team where winning trophies has been such an attraction to bring players to here. So, like, it all matters when it comes time to actually try and win it. That said, what are we looking at grand scale? And what are we looking at for each individual tournament? What are your sort of thoughts as we sort of get ready to get into the season?
I would want to win every single tournament, but that's not realistically possible. For me, I think the first and foremost goal this season...
Hold on. It is realistically possible to win every single tournament. It's just not possible. It feels hard to win all of them at the same time, but every single tournament is winnable, right?
At that time, yes, absolutely.
Like, every individual tournament is winnable.
It's unlikely that Inter Miami is going to win all the tournaments this season. CONCACAF Champions Cup is the priority. If you win that, I think the season is almost a guaranteed success. But now let's assume that Inter Miami doesn't win the CONCACAF Champions Cup. The next tournament is the next game is the Campeones Cup. Win that. It's a one-off. You have to win it. Go out there, win that trophy.
I think that'll be after the Leagues Cup.
That'll be after the Leagues Cup. But Campeones Cup, I think, is the easiest one that you can win and just back that in your trophy cabinet. It's literally show up on the day and win it.
Yeah, they're going to have to play Toluca, right? So it's not going to be
but
just
show up on the day and win it.
But it will be
literally as easy.
It should be at Miami Freedom Park, so it should be a home game.
I think so.
That's
doable.
Like, I agree with you. That's, you just go win it. But okay, go ahead.
Then we have the Leagues Cup before that, which honestly I wouldn't hold my breath if we lose that. I think you put up a good show, you perform really well, you go in with the intention of winning. But if I'm talking about how I would feel as a fan if Inter Miami loses the Leagues Cup, I'll be disappointed, but I wouldn't be angry about it. That'll be okay. I think doing well in the Supporters' Shield race is important, but I feel the similar way about a Supporters' Shield. The ultimate goal is to make it into next year's CONCACAF Champions Cup rather than win the Supporters' Shield. And then I think the MLS Cup is where it's at. If you don't win the CONCACAF Champions Cup, you have to win the MLS Cup. Absolutely. Is that all the tournaments? Am I missing anyone?
Nope, that's everything.
Yep.
Yeah, it's tough. And like, I will be clear, it is, as we started this podcast talking about, it's easy to get caught up in the moment, and you do evaluate things as they change. And so, to be fair, by the time they won the MLS Cup, it felt like a huge success. But again, if you went back to this time last year, that's not what we were talking about. That felt foregone, right? Or that, it felt like doing something of that level was preordained, right? Destiny, whatever. So it was about how much could you stack on top of that. Here we are. I think this is the best team in MLS on paper. And like, however much we've talked about Mascherano, I do think he got better as the season went along. The team improved in that final third of the season, and then even took another step in the last 10 games or so. So maybe, I do think he comes in sort of at a higher level, more pressure. And so if he doesn't deliver, I don't think he gets sort of grace and like we were talking about, but I do think maybe kicking it off faster is on the table. not having the sort of depths of the of the sort of downtime that we had last year is that would be surprising to me, I think, especially given this team's athleticism and, you know,
Physical
ability to
ceiling
play.
going up.
Yeah, the ceiling. Actually, the truth is, I think they're going to be much better defensively, and I think that won't disappear at any point. And so that just gives
I
you a lot
hope
more
so.
opportunities to win games. So that's maybe why I have that confidence. And so I think 5 trophies. Boom. Do it or we'll call you. Do it or everyone
So
gets fired, right?
we've gone from a treble to a quadruple to a quintuple now, and that's what we're going for, right? That's the only way that this season's going to be a success. If we win 5 trophies this season,
Is that too much to ask for?
I think we need to win the Champions Tour trophy as well in the preseason. Otherwise, what's the point?
No, but okay. To be serious, just to put something on, because I've repeatedly asked you to put it on the record what you expect and what your goals are. If they look at any point like they aren't going to qualify for next year's CONCACAF Champions Cup, you have to fire Mascherano. Period.
Bad.
Like he has.
Bad.
That's unacceptable. Still a failure, but at least that won't ruin your ability to be successful next season. Second, my true, like whether they fail or not, is are they going to win one of the big 2 trophies, which I think is CONCACAF Champions Cup or the MLS Cup. That is, this team is too good. It's too good to not do that. My hope, my realistic hope, is that they do one of those 2, starting with the CONCACAF Champions Cup, first of all, and then get one of the other trophies so that we have multiple moments where we feel good about this team. And then my undeniable success, win the CONCACAF Champions Cup, win the Supporters Shield, because I think this is the best team in the MLS and they should have the best point total. And then a third trophy, whether it's the Campeones Cup or the Leagues Cup, or if you win the double, you can win the MLS Cup. That would be pretty sweet. So
Pretty crazy, yeah.
yeah.
So we've got 3-4 different grades of expectations and musts, let's call them that. And I think those are valid. Those are all valid. Qualifying for the CONCACAF Champions Cup is an absolute must. I think winning one of the 2 big trophies is a must. And then if you win the CONCACAF Champions Cup along with a minor trophy, it's an automatic success. And then if you win both the double, that I think is going to be a cherry on top.
Okay. We've got a couple minutes left. Maybe we can go a couple minutes over an hour. There has been a report over the last 36 hours. The Inter Miami is once again looking at Baltasar Rodriguez to bring him back. I looked at the source of the reporting, and I wouldn't say it's like something that I think is locked in, but also not everything starts with the source that's locked in. Okay, so just like it absolutely, I think is realistic that they're going back in for Baltasar. They, I think, clearly decided in January that he wasn't worth a U22 DP spot. But now they're in February, and the one guy they wanted doesn't want to come here. They have really gone all out to get everything they could want or need for this CONCACAF Champions Cup run. And so it actually would kind of surprise me at this point if they don't find another U22 player. And if you think about the roster math, like I think if you can fill yourself out with one TAM level player and one U22 DP,
It makes sense.
and your options are Tristan Blackman and Telasco Segovia as a U22, that makes more sense because he's a ready-made player at a position that you could really upgrade. But if you can't make that type of signing happen because there is no TAM level signing that you're very confident is going to come in and improve your team, then making Telasco your TAM level player and bringing in a U22 of other sorts, I think makes a ton of sense. I really do.
But my expectation or my thinking was not for them to go back for Baltazar Rodriguez. I don't think he's a U22 level player. I genuinely don't.
Yeah. So specifically about Baltasar, listen, we've talked about him a ton. We've talked about him so much. Our chat loves Baltasar Rodriguez more than Inter Miami Twitter, more than any other Inter Miami sort of space I've seen. So I just leave it at that. But I think they could do better. I don't necessarily
100%.
love the position that Baltasar occupies. That said, I do think Baltasar might be better in a different role. So maybe if you were changing your structure, maybe I would be more interested in Baltasar Rodriguez because he might fit a different role better. But if you're sticking with his 4-4-2, I don't like Baltasar for that spot at all, really. So I think they should keep looking. And here's the other thing I'll say. The MLS window will be open until April, the transfer window. So if they, I don't know, because if you want the player in now, you kind of got, for the CONCACAF Champions Cup, you got to bring him in now. But
I would almost
I think they
say
can do better.
this team is fine. Let it be unless you have like a really lucrative player you want to bring in. And God forbid there's an alien abduction or something, or an opportunity arises late in the transfer window around March, then go do the work. That's how I would approach it. I wouldn't rush into this at all. Be smart about it.
I wouldn't rush into this one because we've seen what it looks like. And it's,
Yes.
if you thought he was good last year, fine. If you thought he was average last year, fine. If you thought he was below average last year, fine. If you thought he was fantastic last year, I think you're wrong. And so if you have an opportunity to go try and find someone that's fantastic with this last spot, that's what I would do. And I'll leave it at that.
We're always back at the same conversation, aren't we? Every 2 weeks.
If they bring Baltasar back, we are looking at the same team as last year, minus
Basically.
the second and third best player, and an upgraded goalkeeper and upgraded center back, and striker.
I mean, that's upgrades somewhere. Anyways.
Okay. Any final thoughts, man?
No, I think the expectations have been set, not in stone, in clay. And we'll come back to this in the middle of the season to see where we stand. And before you know it, our expectations might actually be met sooner rather than later. Fingers crossed.
Okay, guys. We'll be back Saturday. Post-game, they're playing Barcelona de Guayaquil. I will just say, you know who plays for Barcelona de Guayaquil?
Alan Obondo.
Well, I don't know if he actually plays for them. But
I hope he does.
Like, I know he's owned by them, and I'm sure actually he'll probably be there. I don't know if he'll play. But our old friend Dixon Arroyo does play for them and has played for them and is like a regular player for them. So I would be surprised if he doesn't play unless he's injured or something. So, yeah. I think it would be cool to see him. And I think it would be really cool to see Obando actually play, too. You know
I think it would be so funny if he scores against us. That's going to be hilarious if that happens, by the way.
Okay, guys. We'll be back on Saturday after the game for the Raw Reaction. Until then, have a lovely night. We'll see you guys then. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this and have a wonderful day.